Hello and welcome to The Price of Music, brought to you by Music Ally, the show that both looks at the finances of the music industry, while also bringing you stories and comment about the past week in the pop business. I'm Steve Lemack, he's Stuart Dredge. If you want an easy guide to what's going on in the music industry and how it all works, then here we are this week. Because we usually start with a list of stories that we're going to cover and then we'll unveil Stuart's big number of the week. But actually, the big stat this week is also, in many ways, is the big story, at least big enough that we are going to dedicate quite a bit of time to pulling this apart this week, so that when you walk away from all this, you'll be able to blow your music friends' minds with some of the statistics and the implications which they suggest. So we will touch on the latest report into grassroots venues later on, and Bandcamp banning AI-generated songs from its platform, both of which could have been lead stories in other weeks. But I think in terms of the modern music landscape and just how much it's changed in the past 15 odd years, this is the statistic which we should probably focus our minds on. And not just for how big it is, but also what it actually means on, well, several levels, really. It's the total number of songs currently available on streaming services, which was announced last week. The number of tracks available on streaming sites has now risen to 253 million. That's 253 million songs available right now. For starters, who's sat down and counted them all? Where does this figure come from? And can we trust it?
I mean, I did. It's been my personal project this year so far, and I've finished it slightly early. No, this is from Luminate, which is a research company who they do a lot of number crunching for the music industry. They get chart data in the US and around the world. So they are probably the most well-known analytics research company in the music world. So they come with, they have the chops to make their figures worth listening to.
Okay, so where should we start? I was interested in the breakdown of how many songs, are at the top level, the popular songs, but also just how many songs are on the streaming services but barely ever get played, if at all. Can you split them almost into categories of how many plays some of these 253 million songs have had? Is that possible?
I can. There's a very neat pyramid graphic in the report that this came from. So, but just to a bit of context, 253 million, that's up from 202 million last year. So 51 million new tracks in the last year, which means that a fifth of all the music you can stream was released in the last year alone. So a fifth of the world's music catalogue came out in 2025, which is kind of crazy. What's getting played? So 253 million tracks is what we start with. 55.3 million got 0 streams last year.
Right.
No streams at all on any service.
Just say that one more time. So out of the 253 million songs, how many?
55.3 million got 0 streams.
55 million songs are up there and have never been played. Okay.
Not in the last year, at least.
Yeah. Okay.
Then there's another 65.2 million that got 1 to 10 streams. 62.6 million got 11 to 100 streams. So to add that up, 146 million tracks, which is nearly 58% of everything that's available, got 100 streams or fewer last year. And as we discussed before, that is negligible money.
We'll come to that in a second, whether they get paid or not. So upwards from then, so what are we left with? About 100 million?
Yeah, and then there's another 40 million or so that got between 101 and 1,000 streams. So basically 223.8 million tracks got 1,000 streams or fewer last year, and only just over 29 million tracks got more than 1,000 streams. Right. So if we're talking about what's really getting played at that level, it's 29 million tracks.
Okay. So, see, I've got so many thoughts on this, which I just need to get out of my head, really. Let's deal with the money then. Because wasn't there a point where certainly Spotify, I think, of the streaming services, didn't they come up with a suggestion that we're not going to pay people who have earned less than 1,000 plays on the service.
That's true. This happened a couple of years ago. So yeah, on Spotify, you don't earn the royalties on your songs until you get more than 1,000 streams in the last year.
I just see. I'm sorry to stop here. That's not fair, is it? I mean, you've still been played. So, I mean, even though it's a tiny amount, the idea that we're just not going to pay not going to pay any of these small artists, even if they're artists just starting out, I'm afraid you don't count. And I'm not sure that's fair.
Well, this is something that's been an ongoing debate, because this originally came, I mean, there's certain parts of the music industry which support this idea. So this came from the major labels and really.
Well, what a shock! What a shock there.
And the argument that's been put forward in favour of it is that those things aren't earning much money, but if you reroute that money towards artists who are getting more streams, who are the ones that they think of as more professional, who are actually getting momentum, you're putting money in the pockets of artists who are trying to make a living. That was the argument in favour of it. But yeah, you're right. I mean, independent labels have been protesting about this recently, saying we think this penalises smaller artists, newer artists, and independent artists. So it's an ongoing argument. The one thing that's come out in the last week, and there have been a few people making this point online, is if you cross-reference these stats. So this Luminate report said that there's like 223 million tracks got 1,000 streams or fewer last year across all services, not just Spotify.
Mm-hmm.
If you applied that to Spotify, that's like 88% of songs on its service it's not paying for. And that sounds, in isolation, that sounds like, what bastards, evil. They're not paying 88% of the money they have. But then you do then have to think, okay, but remember, 22% of those tracks didn't get any streams. So they don't need to be paid anyway. You wouldn't pay. But yeah, and I was thinking about how to kind of explain this, because I think you're right. In the history of music, if you sold a record, there were royalties, weren't there?
Yeah.
Every sale. And you may have a terrible contract when you didn't get those royalties, and that's a whole other biscuit of cats. But generally, every sale would create royalties. Whereas if you think about a different world, if you think about YouTube, so on YouTube, I can upload me or you can upload a video whenever we want. It might get hundreds, thousands of views, but we don't get any money from that. We have to get to a point, and I think you need to have like 1,000 subscribers on your channel, and you have a certain amount of watch time, where you can join YouTube's partner program and start earning money from the ads. So in that world, YouTube and social media, you have to get to a certain level before you earn anything. And before that, you're just posting your stuff and not earning any money from it. And so this change in Spotify moved music from this old model where every sale is a royalty towards that world where, you have to reach a certain level, be a certain level of popularity before we start paying you. And that's the change that's happening. And that's again, like you say, some people would look at that and go, that doesn't feel fair. You should get paid however little you've been streamed.
It's hard though, is it? I think comparing YouTube and Spotify being is a music service, isn't it? Well, primarily, obviously, it does other things, but primarily it's a music service trying to essentially sell what is these days people's records. And it just feels slightly wrong. And of course, as you say, the major labels, they want the money for the artists who've got somewhere. So that, that their share of the money, I mean, the major labels aren't interested in the bands who are earning less than, are getting less than 1,000 plays, because they're not on the major labels, and they want the money for. And this is the other thing, I understand the point that more of the money will go to some of the artists who have got more than 1,000 plays and are trying to get somewhere, but also more of that money is going to Britney Spears.
Yeah,
that's a bad example. Taylor Swift. Let's try and get up to date, kids. Do you know what I mean? So, but it's going to the top. Bad Bunny's getting some of the money that would have gone, would have been halfpennies. But I think it's the principle of the thing as much as anything. Because I realise, if you've got 900 plays, you are not going to make a fortune. You're not going to make a living out of that. But isn't it partly the principle of this?
I think so. I mean, some of the argument coming from independent labels as well is that they may have a bunch of artists in their catalogue getting fewer than that. But when you add that up for a label, that can be quite meaningful. So yeah, that's where. So Yeah, it was announced at the time, and it was kind of came with these positive ideas of, yes, this will put more money in the pockets of professional musicians, but it's reached. I mean, I've got some more stats again, which shed a bit of context on all this, on what these companies are trying to do and why they're doing that kind of move. According to Illuminate, 106,000 new tracks were delivered to streaming services every day last year. So 106,000 new songs every day. So here's your pub stat. To listen to all of that, to listen to all the music that's gone up this morning, it would take us more than 7,000 hours, which, as committed as we both are.
Yeah.
And I found a Billboard stat. So in 2000, Billboard said just over 35,000 albums came out that year, in 2000. And right now, it's the equivalent of more than 10,000 albums released every single day. That gives you a sense.
Are we absolutely certain? Because you said, when you said at the start, there's around 50 million new tracks have gone up in the past year. But is that all new music, new artists releasing new music, or does that 50 million also include people who've put their catalogue on Spotify or Apple? Because there are still bands now who have managed to get their rights back, so finally they can put their music up. So there will be old music as well amongst that, won't there? It won't all just be brand new releases. Yeah, old music, remastered music, remixes of old music, everything. So what Illuminate measures, it's called ISRCs, which for kind of if any listeners are interested in this. It's International Standard Recording Codes, I think. It's like the code that every track gets assigned when it's uploaded so that Stones can tell what's different. So this includes multiple versions of a track. So for example, if you're a label and you upload a new single of a band and also then the TikTok sped up version, which is quite popular, that's 2 tracks, not 1. So it's in terms of the actual number of new releases, you can do some sums there. But it is a big load. And it's a kind of a... the other thing is this report breaks down, so around 102,000 of those daily tracks are independent and DIY releases. So they're not from major labels. And then the other thing, and we're going to get into AI a bit later, aren't we? But AI is a big part of this. So why has this been growing so fast? Why have there been 50 million net new tracks this last year? We know from Deezer last year, we talked about this, around 50,000 AI-generated tracks a day are being uploaded to its service. And that isn't half. That was about 34% of its daily uploads, which suggests that it's getting about 147,000 new tracks a day. But so when we talk about 104,000 new tracks a day, nearly half of them could be AI generated now, which is the other thing here. And that ties into the fact that lots of them aren't being played because we talked before about how come. So this is what's all swimming around. And this is what's swimming around. Like, I think we're going to talk about is this a problem? What can be done? I think people have been realizing that the number of tracks has been increasing, and there's a lot of noise for years. And we're now in the period of people saying, well, what do we actually do about this? How big a problem is it? And what can be done? Just before we come up with some possible answers for that and what the music industry thinks, there's also, obviously there are implications elsewhere, aren't there, for companies like Spotify? Because if we're up to 253 million songs, how much tech do you need to store all those songs? And how much is it costing a company like Spotify annually to host all these songs? How many supercomputers do you need? And how much of our monthly £12 is going on the equipment, which is just to keep the thing running? Well, so I spent a bit of time digging around this morning, and I don't really have any good answers because basically Spotify declares its costs in a bunch of big buckets, and one of them is R&D, and these costs come under R&D, which also includes everything else Spotify does in terms of developing its service, building things. Right. I did find, a slight tangent, I did find a stat actually for its the climate impact of all this. So Spotify's emissions in 2024, so its carbon dioxide equivalent, it was 195,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. That's a kind of figure that's kind of meaningless if you don't understand what it means, which I don't. But 35.8% of that came from cloud. That's how they described it, which is servers, the cost of storing and transmitting music. Again, this isn't just music; it's also podcasts, it's also videos now, and this is a mixture of
people playing stuff and then storing a bit. But yeah, so in terms of Spotify's climate impact, more than a third of it comes from hosting and storing and transmitting of the music. And this has an impact on that, obviously.
So it would be then, wouldn't it follow that it would be in the interest of the streaming services to push back on the AI tracks that no one is listening to, because they're spending money on hosting these tracks, which no one is interested in and no one's making any money out of. And it's that doesn't make any economic sense apart from anything else, apart from, before we get into the creativity argument about AI, it's just financially, it's not doing anything for them.
Well, that's it. And this is the dilemma these companies face, I think. And this comes back to the bigger question of those 253 million tracks. So 104,000 new tracks a day. If you're a Spotify or an Apple Music or an Amazon Music, whoever you are, I don't think any of them want to say, we're not taking that if it's human music. Like, they don't want to say to any human person uploading music, no, you can't put it on here. Like, I think people would be cross at them. That wouldn't be a good look. So they have to let everything on for humans. And I'm not sure they really want to be taking stuff off. I'm not sure they want to be in the position of saying, well, that song for my human wasn't streamed last year, so we're going to kick it off. Mm-hmm. Again, I think they'd be storing up trouble and protest for themselves. People would be unhappy. So you're right. Where they can take action is AI music. And they could choose to not have it on at all. Again, that's a little bit dicey because maybe some people want to listen to it. Some of these songs have been popular. Mm-hmm. So how do they decide which AI music might get listens and which might not? I don't know how they would decide that before it goes on. They have to let it on and see. They could chuck off the AI music that's not being streamed. And they already do chuck off anything that's being streamed by bots. If they detect like fraudulent activity with an AI song, they kick it off. But yeah, that's the dilemma I have. I think they have to figure out if they're going to be not letting something on or taking it off, is there a danger it's a real human behind it who'll be cross? And if not, is it something that might be listened to? But that does seem to be the only place they have wiggle room if they want to reduce this number of tracks and this noise. I mean, the other approach would be to leave it all on there, but say, actually, we're going to not pay royalties to the songs that don't have many streams, but we're also not going to pay any royalties at all to AI-generated music. They could say that. Again, no one's quite taken that step yet, but that may be what's coming next. So yeah, there's a few things they can do, but it's very, very sensitive because I think when we all think this is too many songs, Spotify should do something about it, but many of the things it could do, the easiest things, would get people equally cross, if that makes sense.
So what does the music industry think, and are there any suggestions then, apart from the ones you've just come up with, of what can be done? Because if the AI steamroller is going to carry on bulldozing its way through the music scene, then this increase of 50 million this year might be outstripped next year. So where do we see this going further down the line?
Yeah, well, as I said, so this idea of having thresholds above which you have to have a certain amount of streams to get royalties, that came from the major label side of things. It's still controversial for independent labels, but that's one approach. Okay, we need to have some kind of bar, some kind of quality bar based on listeners, and then that's the other thing. I think everyone in the industry is unhappy at the idea of this deluge of AI slop music, even if no one's listening to it. So I think, remember, there's that stat from Deezer saying it's only 0.5% of streams, even though it's 34% of all the uploads. So I think people are looking at this and saying, well, it's not taking lots of money away from human artists at the moment, but it could do, and we don't like that. Another stat, actually, interestingly, so Deezer said that AI music was 0.5% of all its streams. Now, in this Luminate report, there's a big stat that says there were 5.1 trillion streams last year of music, audio on demand.
Wow, okay.
So 5.1 trillion streams, 0.5% of that is 25.5 billion. So there could be 25.5 billion streams of AI music, which sounds enormous, but at the same time is small in terms of all the streams, in terms of the money being paid out.
It's mind-boggling, isn't it? I was trying to calculate. You came up with a figure for how long it would take us to listen to songs coming out now. If you wanted to listen to all the music on our streaming service, I think it's something like, what is it, 12 million hours? I've probably got that right. I mean, it's just mind-boggling how much music is out there, and as I say, what is gonna happen in the future. But yeah. I mean, strangely, I guess we should have seen this coming, because with any of these services, there is nothing apart from rights issues of, who owns the music. There is nothing to stop all music from all time, all over the globe, being available. So we're probably getting off lightly with 253 million.
Well, you think about the old days. Like, so I could sit here now. I mean, I am a terrible guitarist. I can't sing for toffee. I could sit here and record a song of me playing guitar, singing, and it could be on streaming services next week, and no one would step in and go, "But it's terrible. It shouldn't be on there." Whereas in the old music industry, that you'd have to get someone to agree that it was worth putting out. You'd have to get a label to say, "Yes, we think you're terrible." So that's the thing. Those barriers were the first to come down. Anyone can now release anything they want, and that's humans. And like you say, now there's AI, which means that a human really, I mean, how many tracks could a single human being make in a day with the best will in the world, even if you're just sort of singing? But with an AI, you could crank out 1,000 songs a day easily. So we should have seen it coming, and we did see it coming. So yeah, I think the big focus in the music industry right now the initial focus now is on AI generated music and fraud. So people who are creating loads of tracks with AI to put them on the streaming service and then are getting bots to stream them to earn royalties. That's something that everyone is united. Streaming services, labels, everyone is saying, that's bad. We don't want to happen. That's taking money away from human artists. So let's stop that. And then beyond that, we do get to this tricky thing, which I think is about, I think it's about thinking, who's trying to make a living from music? Which humans are trying to make a living from music? And how can we give them the best chance to make money and progress and develop and sustain themselves in their career? And so actually some of the stuff that you were talking about, you feel is intrinsically unfair, the track that's what that's getting at. Who are this group of musicians that we do want to support, and is there a cutoff point? And as you've seen, even just from one Spotify trying to do it, it's very touchy and sensitive. But that is once, I think the AI stuff is quite simple and everyone agrees on the basic, get rid of the fraudulent stuff. But I think it's really, really tricky because, I don't know, say I was really good at singing and playing the guitar and I put a song up and no one listens to it, that doesn't mean I shouldn't be encouraged. Think about the bands you love. So I think it's tricky. And I think, but I don't really detect anyone really talking about, in the same way we're sitting here going, 250 million, this is a worrying thing. That hasn't really been a big industry debate. But I do think it's something a lot of musicians feel. And that's the other point of this, actually. If you're an artist releasing your first single and you're aware that 104,000 tracks are coming out the day you release yours, I find it hard to stay positive, really. How on earth do you cut through that noise? And so that's the other aspect of this, which is like, how do musicians feel about this? And would they feel more confident if they knew that stuff was being done to give them the best chance of reaching the people who might like them?
Yeah. Okay.
That is the other thing, actually, the other thing that Spotify would say on Apple Music is there's work they can do there because they have put a lot of money and a lot of effort and people at how do you find music and recommend it to people who'd like it. So that is the other part of this. Maybe there is a world in which it doesn't matter how much music is uploaded every day. What matters is if the good stuff is being recommended to people who'd like it. And there is work they can do there by, whether it's the clever algorithms, whether it's the people listening to the releases from like proven labels and saying, this band are great, I'm going to put them on this playlist quite high up. All that stuff becomes maybe more important the more tracks there are, I think.
Yeah.
So it's not just about kicking stuff off or not paying royalties. It's about how do you identify stuff that's good and help it.
Your thoughts on any of this, drop us a line, the price of music podcast at gmail.com. Very quickly then, a couple of bits of any other business. The timeline of this is quite confusing because once again, we're recording on Tuesday lunchtime, which means this evening, Tuesday evening, after we've finished this, the Music Venue Trust, it's tonight that the Music Venue Trust, the charity which supports and champions the UK's grassroots music venues, they're launching their annual reports tonight at the V&A in London, and obviously we'll report back on that next week. We do know some of the details which we can bring you before, because they'll be available to you by the time this podcast is out, but we do know some things, some of the details in the report, and one or two stats. If I just throw one or two things at you, Stuart. So for starters, let's do the basics. So this year they will reveal that the Music Venue Trust currently represents 801 venues, which put on 174,000 live events in 2025, contributing around £580 million to the economy. That's the basics. The average profit margin for a grassroots venue went up slightly last year, but it's still only 2.5%. While more worryingly, it's elsewhere in the report, it says half of grassroots venues reported no profit at all over the past 12 months. So the margins working at grassroots level are still very precarious. Also, a number of people employed by venues, that's around 25,000 people working for grassroots venues around the UK, although that is down by, I think the report says, by about 20%, which I think they point to the increase in the employer national insurance contribution as to why venues had to cut staff, because with higher staff costs, they just couldn't afford to keep all the staff on. So I think there has been, unfortunately, a case of one or two people being laid off, which I think is actually a problem across a lot of small businesses. But the number of venues closing appears to have slowed down. To balance that up, though, we should also point out, as the report does, that the Music Venue Trust, it has its own emergency response team. This is like a team of experts who are ready to help out venues who've reached a crisis point or other for whatever reason. And it could be things like disputes with landlords, noise complaints, threatened redevelopment, all those sort of things. But last year, the MVT's emergency response team dealt with 205 cases. That's a quarter of all the venues faced a point where they thought they might have to close before the MVT stepped in. Which sounds, but the only thing, having read what I have of the report so far, you do get the impression, and I think talking to one or two people in grassroots, there is also the impression that I think people feel that we may be about to turn a corner, because, I mean, there are noises coming from the Chancellor that that awful business rate increase, which we talked about, which happened, which was unveiled just before Christmas. We're hoping that might be mitigated for the hospitality sector, and that would help. There's also there's money coming from the Live Trust. So I think there's a cautious note of optimism, but we'll obviously find out more tonight.
Well, yeah, I saw there was a sentence I picked out in, I don't know if it's the press release or the report, but it was like, it's no longer just about rescue, it's about working with partners to deliver investment and reform. And that's a key message to me, that because I think that this message, venues are closing, we have to save them. That's been a really strong message, hasn't it? But they seem to be saying, but that's not the only story. There's a positive story to be told here about investing and making them better and building it and building, saving. So that's good. The other thing I picked out was this, the voluntary levy stuff about ticketing. And there's some quite punchy stuff on that, isn't it? Saying June, are they setting June as a deadline, saying that's when there has to be a levy agreed by the whole live industry, otherwise the government should step in?
Well, it's about the take-up. So obviously the voluntary contributions have started coming in. Bands, there's loads of bands. I can't list them all, but thank you very much to all the bands and promoters who have who've bought into this, where any gig above 5,000 capacity in an arena or a stadium, the idea is that £1 from each of the tickets sold goes to the Live Trust, and the Live Trust then spread the money out through the grassroots ecosystem, whether it's to the venues themselves or new and emerging promoters or micro festivals, or and all the artists themselves, actually, to help artists go out on tour. So the money will go there. The ask of government got behind this idea that the industry should find a way of solving the problem of small venues closing, that the industry should do it themselves. So it's backed by government. There is obviously there's a new minister has arrived on the scene, a new culture minister, who very early on said, I'm really backing this scheme, but I would like to see the take up of it as a voluntary scheme. Even though it's a voluntary scheme, I'd like it to feel more like a statutory scheme. I'd like more buy-in. I want to see the take up of this up to 50% by X time, and then ultimately we should be as close to 100% of people taking part and contributing £1 from their big gigs. But yeah, there are deadlines along the way. We'll see. And as you say, the thing is, if they set an ultimate if government sets, if DCMS ultimately sets a final deadline, which is possible, I guess, that they will say, right, you haven't done well enough. Not enough people have entered into the spirit of this. You can't be trusted as an industry to save yourselves. So we are going to bring in, we're going to table a mandatory levy, and we'll put that across the top end of the industry. It's up to you. So that's where we are. But the first money which has arrived at the trust, the first set of do you call them grants? No, I think you do. The first tranche of awards, financial awards, will go out pretty soon, I think. Mm-hmm. So, and then it will be interesting to see, how that affects the grassroots. But I think it is a bit positive. It is more positive, and I think it'd be great this year. As I said on last week's programme and just before Christmas, no one wants us banging on about venues closing down, and it would be much better for everyone if the narrative was, do you know what, your venue down the end of your road has just got a new sound system, or the bogs are nicer, the lights have been done, they've got better inclusive access at the venue due to the fact that we've raised some money to make the venue a nicer place and a more inclusive place for people to go. Those are the stories that we would much rather be telling.
This is what I want from, we should tell the Music Venue Trust, next year's report, I want a percentage stat for nicer bogs.
Yeah.
What percentage of venues funded last year by the trust have nicer bogs now? Because that could be a strong.
Starting in King Tut's, starting in Glasgow at King Tut's Wah Hut. There's a running gag for regular listeners. Finally, this week, we've been asking recently, or even last week, we mentioned this. We've been asking and even earlier in the show, what are streaming services going to do about AI, and what angle some leading investors in music might take. Well, last week, Bandcamp came out and banned all music which is entirely or substantially created by AI. And I didn't see this coming.
No, it came out of the blue, really. And if anyone, for listeners who don't know Bandcamp's not, you can stream music on there, but it's more of a stores platform where artists and labels can sell music to their fans directly. And I think you've got to the number of it there. Music and audio generated wholly or in substantial part by AI is not permitted on Bandcamp. And you can even, as a listener, you can file a report if you think something is AI generated, which could be misused. If there's a band you don't like, I think they're AI. But very clear right now. And they've also banned any use of AI to impersonate other artists or styles. So if you are using AI to kind of make, do vocal clone of another artist. So the whole point here is we're putting human creativity first. I said it's a very kind of strong stance. And like you say, it's kind of come out, it's been the first big music platform to say we're banning it entirely. The little question I have, which is not poking any kind of any shade at them, is that line of substantially generated is quite blurry and may get blurrier still. Mm-hmm. Like how much of a work has to be the human before you let it on, and how do you tell? You know, at some point, someone might be in a studio using AI to create the samples, then using traditional tools to make a song, then singing over the top of it, and then using AI to make their voice sound different. That all gets quite blurry. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to set a policy, you know you'll deal with those things. So yeah, I'm sure they're aware of it.
Yeah.
But yeah. And I think I don't know, I've been thinking about this for a while. I mean, let me run this past you and see if you think it's good. You know that whole thing about fair trade goods? You've got people buy fair trade goods because they want to know they're buying something ethical. I wonder if human music is going to become a little tag like that. Like the more you say this is human music, or the more as a platform you say we don't allow our music, does that encourage people to come and use you? Like, does it become a selling point in that way?
Yeah, well, did you see will.i.am's statement on AI last week?
Oh no, go on.
Well, we don't have time to do it all here. We may come back to it in the lock-in, but he was trying to, and he's part, isn't he? He's an investor in an AI company himself.
Yeah.
And he was basically saying, look, oranges, do you know if your oranges are organic? Do you care if your oranges are organic? Otherwise, you just buy oranges. And it was a really complicated kind of an analogy, but I think he was coming at it from that angle of, well, you know, if you only want organic oranges, then, you know, don't get involved in these oranges. Thank you very much for that clarity. And that'll do it for this week. Thank you very much for listening. We may come back to that Bandcamp story. Certainly, as I say, possibly more on the Music Venue Trust live report next week and what it really means to us as fans going to see bands in small venues. We'll possibly do that more next week, particularly if we can get a guest on to talk about it with us. But in the meantime, thank you very much for listening. If you are into what we're trying to do here, which I said last week, is basically trying to demystify the industry one very small step at a time, do feel free to pass the word on to friends, family, colleagues, somebody on the bus you sat next to who's listening to music, anything, anyone, bring them this way, direct them this way. You can, of course, in the meantime, support us via Patreon and sign up to be a super fan, which gets you an extra bit of the show, which we call the lock-in. There's an extra 15 minutes of bonus material for anyone who chooses to become a super fan at patreon.com/The Price of Music. Or if you'd just like to get in touch with us, it'd be nice to hear from you. With any thoughts, send us an email to thepriceofmusicpodcast@gmail.com. Till next week, take care. Goodbye.